People often ask me, is it possible to exclude debts paid by others when you're applying for a VA loan? Did you know that not all debt has to count against you when applying for a VA loan? If someone else is paying it, like a parent or a spouse, you might actually be able to leave it off of your debt to income ratio entirely. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to work that to your advantage. So let's talk a little bit about contingent and non-contingent liabilities. Before I do that, let's just hop in the VA handbook and see the definition. And the VA handbook is right here. And this is in chapter 4, topic 5 of the VA handbook. Applicant as co-obligor, I don't even know how to say that, or co-borrower of a VA loan, the applicant may have a contingent liability based on co-signing a loan if there is evidence that the loan payments are being made by someone else, and there is no reason to believe that the applicant will have to participate in repayment of the loan. Then the lender may exclude the loan payments from the monthly obligations. So what the heck does it actually mean, right? So first of all, let's talk about contingent versus non-contingent liability. So people do get confused on this. There are different rules for each one, and that's why I need to talk about each one. So a contingent liability is where you are the co-applicant with someone on a loan. So for example, and I like to use car notes as a really good example of this because there are two different ways people do car loans with a child. I'm specifically talking about with a child, but it could be with a parent or whoever, your brother, your cousin, whoever. So I'll just say parent to child for now, just to make it simple. So contingent would be your child is 18 and they go down to the car dealership and try to get a car note. And the car person says, you know what, you don't really have enough credit. Can you have mom and dad co-sign on it? And you're like, okay, fine. I'll co-sign for the kids so they get their car, right? Because you want them to have a car. Non-contingent is where you actually apply on your own without the child being on there. So maybe the child is only 16 and they're not old enough to even get a car loan. So you get the car loan and you say, you know what, I'm going to pay this thing until you turn 18. But once you turn 18, the car note is your problem, but you never refi the loan. And you have what's called a non-contingent liability. Basically, it means that the other person is paying the loan and they might pay you directly. They might pay you as some sort of reimbursement, or they might be paying it directly to the car company. So that would be a non-contingent liability. And the rules are different on both, and that's why I'm keeping them separate. So how does this matter on the VA loan? So if it's a contingent liability, which is one where you are paying for someone else, you could potentially exclude it if there is evidence that the other party is paying. And we would need 12 canceled checks on that. The VA guidelines are a little bit vague on that, but I can tell you that every single lender I've talked to has they do want the 12 checks showing that the other person is actually paying it, and there is reason for that to continue. And we see this oftentimes divorces as well, where maybe you got divorced and it was originally the two of you together had the note, and then the one person got in the divorce, but they never took it off of credit. Like those kind of things often happen as well on a contingent liability. So again, you could potentially exclude it if there is evidence that there have been 12 payments made by the other person. Not 8, not 9, not 6, but 12. Now, non-contingent, in other words, the other person's not on the debt in question. It's your debt, basically. You're stuck with that one because it's non-contingent. In other words, you took out the loan, you need to make the payments, and doesn't matter who's actually paying, it's non-contingent. In other words, you owe the money. Now, let's talk about what about late? What if they're late on the loan? Now, this is where it gets really interesting because the VA guidance is super vague on this topic. They basically said lenders use your own judgment on this. So if it's contingent, in other words, you are the co-signer on the loan. So maybe you co-sign for your kid and the kid lost their job and things went sideways. And it was recent. Well, it's more than a year old. It's not even really a problem, but say it was recent. Say it was 3 or 4 months ago, your kid lost their job and they went late on the loan. What happens at that point? If they're trashing your credit because they were late, which kind of sucks, but things happen, right? How is that viewed? And in those kind of situations, I've actually talked to different lenders, and that is what's called a lender interpretation. In other words, the lender gets to decide how they want to proceed. Some lenders will say, you know what, it sucks to be you. You should have taken responsibility for the loan and seen that the kid was late and paid it instead of them, or made them pay it, or whatever you want to do. Other lenders are like, you know what, it's someone else's debt, even though you're co-signer on the debt, that could potentially exclude that as towards qualification or counting against. We would not count it against your qualifications. What I'm trying to say. Now, non-contingent, in other words, the other person's on a loan. So this actually happened to me recently, that the person went overseas and they basically, instead of selling their car normally, they actually gave their car to someone and said, hey, take over my payments. Well, guess what? The person that took over the payments was kind of a deadbeat, did not make the payments. The car got repoed. And my question was, well, it's not their car anymore. They actually sold it. And the lender said, too bad. They did not pay off the debt. They didn't refi the debt to get the person out. They're still on the loan. And because they're still on the loan as the sole borrower, even though the other person got the car repossessed, my veteran borrower should have been responsible, and they weren't. And so the car got repossessed, trashed their credit. Long story short, they are not getting approved. So that is contingent versus non-contingent liabilities. As always, any question about VA loans or anything in particular, feel free to give me a call. My number is 937-572-3713 or Scarpero.com. Talk to you soon. Bye.